currently 24th in the Players' Championship standings, so he's got some work to do, but a trophy in Legacy today would certainly move that number closer to getting him one of those Players' Championship spots.
Yeah, that goes a long way.
And to do it, though, he's going to have to beat Chihoy Yim. Chihoy on the left. Brad, by virtue of being the 5 seed, he gets to be on the play. You see a good luck, good game handshake to start off, and now we are underway. As looks like both players are on 7s. And Brad's going to start out by knowing what he's fighting against. It's going to be Jitaxi and Probe.
That's going to be pretty huge, I think. Just knowing whether or not Chihoy has it. And especially since Chihoy doesn't actually have a brainstorm in his hand, he's not really going to be able to disguise his hand all that well.
Okay. So we have Jace, Counterbalance, Vendilion Click, Snapcaster, Pyroblast, and then 2 lands. We have a Tundra and a Fetch.
And yes, this is game 1. Chihoy does have main deck Pyroblast. That has been a trend. Started, I think, with one of the European Legacy Grand Prix, and a tradition continued on from Joe Lissette and now Chihoy.
Yeah, Reed Duke doing the same thing as well. You see, interesting, Pyroblast, not Red Elemental Blast. We talked about how that probably doesn't matter. You know, Brad does play cards like Spellskite in his deck, though, so the difference might actually show itself here.
Yeah, I'm really not sure if you bring in Spellskite against this deck, but it is cute.
Turn 1, it was just a Tropical Island from Brad, no 1-drop. Looks like his hand has Pendelhaven and Inkmoth as the duo. He's going to play Inkmoth, and a creature will come to play. It looks like he's going to try a Blighted Agent. And there it is. He knows Chihoy has a Pyroblast for it, but he's going to have to work through the removal somehow.
Well, I mean, he also has a Daze, which is
pretty
good in this spot.
Maybe not then. We will see whether Chihoy goes for it. It's Volcanic Island. He's going to play the Pyroblast, and that's going to get it dazed. Or I assume presumably it will get dazed. Yeah.
I mean, Chihoy did have a lot of kind of expensive stuff in his hand. He had a Snapcaster Mage, a Vendilion Click, a Jace the Mind Sculptor, and he was kind of light on land. So, like, this daze might actually be pretty live going forward. And Brad does have a creature threat in the form of Inkmoth Nexus. So maybe this Blighted Agent isn't as important.
Well, he's got a pick here, right? Because he knows that next turn Chihoy has land counterbalance as a play. So if you daze this Pyroblast, you're giving Chihoy counterbalance. So
sure. But
which one do you want? Which way do you want to have it go, right?
I think I want the threats.
Okay, so you're gonna you daze here and give him the enchantment.
I think so.
Probably. Yeah, it's close though, right?
It's certainly close.
Yeah. Counterbalance this early in the game, you have to think it's gonna snag at least one of your spells, probably 2. And Brad shows respect to Counterbalance. He lets the Blighted Agent die. Chihoy will go for the Counterbalance, and now we get the daze.
Yeah, so Brad doing a lot of Hollywooding there. I think if he knew, like, he saw the Pyroblast, you know? Like,
yeah, he knew.
He had to know whether or not he was going to daze that Pyroblast. And I think by thinking about it a long time, he was hoping to create the illusion that he actually did not have it, forcing Chihoy to kind of like play his game and tap out and play the counterbalance, walk it right into the daze. But also since Chihoy's kind of mana light and he has some expensive stuff, I don't think Chihoy really had an option there. Like in an ideal world, yeah, you would like to play around daze, but this deck doesn't exactly give you a lot of time to do that.
Yeah, we see there Brad on turn 2 punches in for 1 poison with that Inkmoth Nexus. Doesn't have the Pendelhaven for it because he dazed last turn. And we go back to Chihoy. He does have land number 3. We may see Vendilion Click here. We will see what happens.
Yeah, Vendilion Click might be one of the best answers against Infect. We saw Baleful Strix also be pretty powerful against this deck. Just like any sort of flying blocker, and in this case, Vendilion Click is one that can disrupt it compared to something like Baleful Strix, which just draws you a card and is solid value. I think being able to both disrupt the Infect deck and also block down Inkmoth Nexus is very important.
Yeah, Brad's draw for the turn was Glistener Elf. We'll see how he chooses to play it. He has another land here with Pendelhaven, if not more. He does know that if Chihoy draws another land, he's got to watch out for Jace the Mind Sculptor here. Brad has some threats on the board, but not a ton of them. If Chihoy on turn 4 just gets to go land Jace, that's not a spot that Brad really wants to be in. He doesn't have enough pump to just kill Chihoy on the swing back.
Yeah, so then maybe Chihoy's on, I don't know, like a 3-turn clock after Jace resolves. So that's 3 additional brainstorms probably that Jace is going to be able to do. And it's like, can Brad probably fight through that? I'm guessing not.
Yeah, that's more than I'd want to. You know, it'd be pretty bold of Chihoy to make a move like that because there's a very good chance that if you just play Jace, then you die.
Right. And I think that's one of the ways that Brad has been doing pretty well against his opponents all weekend is that people have the fear.
Right. But the fear goes away when you get to see your opponent's hand. And that's what Chihoi gets to do. It's a Vendilion click. And Brad's hand's kind of a loser here. And now Chihoi gets to know that. It's Force of Will, Glistener Elf, 3 lands. So a creature, Force Will, no blue card. This hand doesn't do anything.
Yeah, not really. And this is definitely one of the points in the game where Brad just needs to draw a Brainstorm.
Yeah. It's one of the reasons you play Blue in Legacy is so you can take hands like this and still win with them. But he didn't have the Brainstorm. Chihoi, and that's, the thumbs up. He lets Brad keep all the cards. Blocks Inkmoth, takes nothing. Brad recasts Glistener Elf. Now, if you're Chihoi, I bet you just slam. Maybe you just slam the Jace.
Well,
or you don't have the land, but you can Miracle the Terminus.
Yeah,
so.
that also works.
Yeah. You see Chihoi has a Brainstorm and a Snapcaster in hand. He does not have land 4. I wonder if we just see him dig for it with Brainstorm.
Yeah, I think you do.
The hand is Brainstorm, Jace.
Chihoi certainly has patience, though.
Yeah.
And I don't think he necessarily needs to fire off this Brainstorm.
And
It is
there
very,
you see,
it's
he
very
doesn't.
tempting, but
Yeah. And just going to go ahead and sit back right now. He's not under much pressure. There's an Inkmoth on Brad's side. Like, that's fine.
yeah, I think there's 2 avenues that Chihoi could play it. The one is, oh no, I'm playing against this really fast combo deck and I need to make a move. I need to do something, so I should probably Brainstorm. And the danger there is Brad just killing him if he tries to be too patient. And the other one is like if he gets too impatient and just fires off the Brainstorm and then potentially Brainstorm locks himself without a shuffler, that could lose you the game on the spot.
Yeah. So for that turn, Brad swung in for 1 with Inkmoth Nexus. He could have pumped with Pendelhaven, but instead made Glistener Elf. And Chihoi now, wow. Did he know that was that set up or was that blind?
That's blind.
He brainstormed on Brad's turn, and that's like playing to just small percentages, right? And one of the small percentages he can do is, well, if my top card is Terminus, brainstorming on Brad's turn is going to be really good.
Yeah, exactly. And hitting your... Oh, he did it in response. So the Glistener Elf is actually alive.
Okay, this is before he took damage.
So this is not the biggest blowout of all time.
Okay, Brad was playing fast. He's like, wait, before damage, I want to brainstorm. So the Glistener Elf...
No, he did it with the Glistener Elf on the stack.
Okay, so he was looking to see if he could counter the Glistener Elf
Right.
or respond. So Glistener gets to survive. Chihoi doesn't get the complete blowout, but he does get to swords the Glistener Elf here, which is good enough. Keeping things clean, Brad has a Tropical Island and a Pendelhaven.
Yeah, and Chihoi still doesn't have land 4, so he is functionally locked under this Brainstorm for at least 2 more turns before he gets to see a fresh card.
Fetch land from Brad. It looks like he's drawn another threat. It's Blighted Agent. All right, Brad's back on the attacks. He's only managed to get Chihoi to 2 infect so far, however. Chihoi's draw for the turn was a Vendilion click. You may see him click himself here.
Yeah, I mean, that gets you to a fresh card sooner, and I think we saw that Chihoi had 2 copies of Jace the Mind Sculptor in his hand. Not exactly the best card in this matchup, and certainly not a card that you want multiples of.
Yeah, looking at Brad's hand, he's got some pressure since we last saw it. He has a land, but he's drawn 2 Force of Wills. So with the help of Pendelhaven, he can swing 2 a turn, and he does have Force plus blue card. If he needs to cast it now, he has 1 Force. If he waits, he may even have 2 Forces.
Yeah, so he can get in for 2 damage here, or 2 infect damage, and you gotta assume that this is gonna be unopposed, considering that Blighted Agent's unblockable.
It's kill spell or bust.
Right.
Chihoi does have Snapcaster Mage.
Okay, that is certainly true.
So
I think Brad would be pretty happy to Force Will that.
yeah.
So now Chihoi goes up to 4 infect. Next turn, if Brad has something like an Invigorate.
Yeah, Brad's weighing some options here. He has a land he can keep in his hand, and that'll make his Brainstorm better. At the same time, if he casts the land, plays the land, maybe he could hardcast a Force of Will someday. But with Pendelhaven, leaving 5 up, that probably never happens.
Yeah, probably not.
So he's hanging on to it.
It cuts your clock by too much.
Yeah, if Brad didn't have Pendelhaven, I think making the 4th land there is pretty reasonable. Just to like,
Yeah.
hey, now I can cast these.
Yeah, I agree. Especially since Chihoi gets a fire off this Vendilion click, probably wants to take a Force of Will. I like Brad not Force of Willing this because ultimately the click doesn't matter. It gets to disrupt you a little bit, but either you force the click and both your forces are gone, or the click resolves. Maybe it takes a Force of Will, and hopefully you get to draw another blue
Yeah.
card off that and still have it up.
agree the 3-1 body is not relevant here. He is going to take away a Force of Will. And I guess the hope is Jihoy would want to untap and either Jace unsummon or Snapcaster Path. Or Snapcaster, sorry, Swords. We're not playing Modern, we're playing Legacy. And he did draw Divining Top, but he's feeling the pressure a little bit. So here's the test. Brad, did you draw a blue card? Yeah.
Absolutely not.
You'd say Brad's 100% to Force there if he has a blue card?
Yes.
Yeah, Snapcaster gets the Swords. Brad with no Infectors. And there is our blue card. It was a little late, though. It's Taxing Probe. He's going to hard cast it. Top Jace. Plenty of looking at your top 3 cards going on. But the bigger problem is that Jihoy actually has 5 power worth of creatures. And that's an unusual spot to see his deck in. Normally we don't, getting on some early beats.
Yeah, I mean, Vendilion Click actually ends up being a pretty fast clock.
Yeah, it's big. It's a 3-1 for 3, right? It's those, Lifebane Zombies, a fast clock, too.
Exactly.
Similar cards.
And Jihoy does have 6 creatures in his deck in addition to the 2 copies of Entreat the Angels, so it's not uncommon for him, instead of playing this long, grindy game that you might think that Miracles is all about, to instead end up just playing like this sort of merfolk fish-style game, where you kind of just disrupt them a little bit and beat them up with little creatures.
Absolutely. We see here another swing from Jihoy. Brad Nelson's going to take more hits here. And one thing the Infect deck that I've noticed when we've watched it before that it really doesn't do well is it does not combat creatures very well. Like once you get to the point where you're losing a race, like this deck does not block.
No, almost certainly not. I mean, I think if you're blocking, you are in the worst of positions.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you could go Glistener Elf, Pendelhaven, and he's going to go ahead and crop rotate away. This is on end step. He's going to rotate away a tropical island. So he's hoping to hit an Ink Moth and then a 4-point pump spell.
Correct.
So he has Ink Moth. If he draws a 4-point pump spell, he's good here, barring a good spin of the top for Jihoy.
Yes, exactly. So
he's got a shot.
Yeah, he does have a shot. He's doing what he needs to do.
Did he draw the pump spell?
He drew a forest.
That's almost like a pump spell. And he had his shot. That's not going to get there. He will get one more attempt at it unless Jihoy finds a counter spell, and that Force of Will he found on top of his deck probably is the nail in the coffin here.
Yeah, I feel like because, well, it depends. I mean, Brad could potentially draw something like Brainstorm and draw multiple business cards, but I feel like since Brad hasn't really done much over the last couple of turns, Jihoy might just Force of Will that Brainstorm.
Yeah, Jihoy swinging both creatures. Brad can just eat the Snapcaster Mage if he wants to.
That is true. And then Jihoy could play out a Jace with Force of Will backup, bounce the Ink Moth Nexus.
Yeah, I mean, there is a cost you pay to make such a play.
Yeah, and Brad knows that the Jace is there.
Draws a card. His card was Berserk, and that's not going to do it. And we are on to game 2. Jihoy Yim up a game on Brad Nelson. Will Miracles take it down this time? It's half the way there.
Yeah, I mean, Jihoy made that game look pretty easy. Like, granted, Brad flooded out and didn't draw Brainstorm, but hey, sometimes that happens.
Yeah, I mean, he had a lot of pressure on, actually. And even at the end there, there was a turn where he could draw that 4-point pump spell and have a real good shot at winning. It turned out that Jihoy did have a Force of Will in his top 3, so
yeah.
Even if he top decks there, he doesn't get it.
Well, I mean, both players know that Jihoy had a Jace, so it's hard to imagine that he would just not cast that. Like, he's got to have something floating on the top 3.
Yeah, so he must feel pretty safe there. So, welcome back to the booth. For those of you watching, we are in the finals of our Legacy Open. This is Jihoy Yim's Blue-White-Red Miracles deck versus Brad Nelson's Blue-Green Infect deck. Thank you for joining us, and we are going to give away our biggest prize of the evening. This is a year's worth of Star City Games Premium. The rules are the same as we've been doing all evening. We're going to ask you a question, and on Twitter, we're going to see, if you know the answer, make sure you tweet it with the hashtag SCG Premium. Tweet it at SCG Live, and the winner will be selected at the end of our tournament for 12 months of Star City Games Premium. We've been talking all evening about the Blue-Green Infect deck, but we haven't given much to Blue-White-Red Miracles. This is the deck that Jihoy Yim is playing. And I want to just talk about, well, it's Blue-White-Red in the deck, and it just feels like a Blue-White deck. So the question is, what is the red card that he's actually playing in his main deck? If you believe you know that, there is actually one red card. The rest of it is blue-white. Tweet that answer to us with the hashtag SCG Premium. And at the end of the evening, we will select a winner.
Sounds good.
Sounds great. Let's go back to the matchup and talk a bit about the sideboard, though. This is interesting part, and I want to. The card I was most excited looking at Chiho Yim's sideboard, and I was like, wow, this card is almost unbeatable.
I can guess it.
Can you guys? All right. Well, he has 14 cards, so you got a 1 out of 14 chance, right?
Is it Staticaster?
Boom. All right. First guess. How lucky?
Easy game. Yeah, I got lucky. It was a lucky guess.
I don't see how, like, if this card, first of all, it has flash. So, like, you can fight a good counter war with this card. That's right. You can end step it. You can put Brad in awkward situations. And when this card resolves, if it does, I don't know how blue-green, like, can reasonably interact with this card.
Maybe some Pendelhaven tricks, Spellskite, some pump spells.
Yeah.
Attacking with 3 creatures with different names. I mean, these are not good options.
Yeah,
right?
Spellskite's the only one of those you mentioned that sounded at all reasonable. And that means Brad has to board in a 0-4 against Miracles, which, yay.
Yeah, I mean, it honestly might not be the worst, especially once Brad sees Chihoi's list, right? Like, he has a Pithing Needle to deal with the Inkmoth Nexuses. He has an Is It Staticaster to deal with basically Brad's deck. And maybe that card will see a lot more play going forward. But anyway, Chihoi also has 1 copy of Blood Moon, which is pretty reasonable against Brad's deck.
Yeah.
A couple Flusterstorms to fight some counter wars. Also Pyroblast, Red Elemental Blast to help do the same, but also target Blighted Agent. Wear Tear to get rid of an Inkmoth Nexus. Maybe Venser is okay. Pyroclasm is a cheap enough removal spell. Like, Chihoi has plenty of options, and I think a lot of what we're going to see in this matchup is just him lowering his mana curve and putting in more efficient cards.
All right, so you look at the efficient cards, you're talking about things like, you know, Pyroclasm, maybe Wear Tear. It's pretty good against Inkmoth, and that's a card he has some trouble with.
Right.
Venser is pretty expensive. Do you like Pithing Needle? It deals with Inkmoth.
Yes.
Okay.
I snap off the 1 Pithing Needle. I don't think that that one's particularly close, just because
Costs 1.
Yeah, it's a 1 mana card, and it deals with every single Inkmoth Nexus that Brad could draw for the rest of the game.
Yeah, in some matchups, we saw last matchup in the mirror, the Blighted Agents were, you know, the card of choice. It's interesting, so he has 3 Infect creatures, right? And there are matchups where, like, all 3 of them are the best. Like,
oh, yeah.
when you need to be fast, it's Glistener Elf, right? That can turn 2, kill you. In Creature Mirrors, that Blighted Agent was really good against blue-green Infect. Once it was down, Todd can't block it, Todd couldn't remove it. But in the control matchups, Inkmoth Nexus is probably the all-star Infect card.
Yeah, especially when people have things like Abrupt Decay against Shardless Bug, you know, and, and also against this Miracles deck.
Has no copies of Wasteland in it, so it doesn't even have the typical answer to Inkmoth. And so Chihoi probably has to board in extra ways to answer it. On Brad's side, and we've seen this from Tom Ross a bit, usually the deck goes a bit bigger after board. So cards like Sylvan Library, you start to use. Krosan Grip, I'd have to think you want that against a Miracles player. If it's in your sideboard, that's got to be the matchup it's for. Is there anything else you like here?
Depending on how frisky you think Chihoi is going to get, like, you know that the Pyroblast is okay. You know that the Staticaster is awesome. Blood Moon has the potential to be a blowout, so does Pyroclasm.
Oh, wow. I see where you're going with this.
Those cards are all red. Brad can bring in a blue blast to basically counter Chihoi's red blasts.
So, all right, the cards that you can counter with Blue Blast are all insane, but there's only about 6 of them in the deck. There's only like even 6 targets.
That's why I was saying 1 Blue Blast. I would not bring in the second one. I wouldn't want to overload on those effects, but the first one might be worth it.
You do play Brainstorm. You can play cards that are situationally awesome and situationally dead. It's one of the advantages to Legacy.
Potentially.
Interesting.
Potentially Spellskite, potentially some of the Disenchants. Just depends on what Brad views as a threat. It's like, okay, Counterbalance is this thing, right? Like, that's the big threat that looms. But if you have Inkmoth Nexus and an Invigorate, is that really a big deal?
Well, my guess is that he believes it to be a big deal. So, like, if he doesn't port in Krosan Grip in this matchup, like, why are they in his sideboard, right? What matchup would they be for?
Jitte.
All right, okay. There's a good answer. But a lot of the decks that play Jitte, I guess Stoneblade, okay. I was going to say most of them, like Death and Taxes doesn't play blue cards. But yeah, Stoneblade getting Jitte is pretty good. Actually, talking with Tom Ross about the deck, he said the majority of games he loses are to Umezawa's Jitte.
Yeah.
once they get, it has the same problem the Elves has, right? Once they get counters on it, you're done.
Yep, exactly. And I feel like Staticaster is kind of like a GTA with haste.
And doesn't require a second part.
Right.
It's just
at least for this matchup. I mean, something like Stoneforge Mystic, you know, assembles the combo on its own. It's like you have a creature and the GTA to put it on. But it is a little slow. Whereas Staticaster is just like, oh, hello, I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm shooting things, lighting all your guys on fire.
So what you're saying is, if I want to beat the Infect deck, play more Staticasters in my sideboard.
I think so.
How deep do you know, like, pingers, like, what is it? We could go, if we want to get even lower to the ground, we could play cards like Fire Slinger or Shadow Guild Mage or
Well, Grim Lavamancer.
Grim Lavamancer. Yeah, you have to have 2 cards for him.
I think
Maybe
that's
I don't
okay.
have him. That's probably fine. What if I want more than 4? Then we can go to Shadow Guild Mage, right? Then he's the next best pinger.
I've played Shadow Guild Mage in a constructed Pro Tour.
Was it a Legacy Pro Tour?
No.
No. He was in constructed for a bit, right?
Yeah.
I don't remember. It was when he was time shifted, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't remember the deck, but I know that he was.
I had him in my zoo deck against fairies, so kind of the same thing. It was like a lot of X1 creatures running around, and that guy seemed pretty good.
Spellstutter Sprite, Vendilion Click, those guys are jerks.
You know, those guys are jerks.
Yeah. I know Spellstutter Sprite's blue, but he messes with your fun. He's not doing anything unfair. Well, not in the cool way of unfair.
Right.
We do see Brad on the play here. He has the turn 1 Noble Hierarch. Chihoy was on 6 cards. Brad down a game, so he's going to try to equalize here. Turn 2 plays an Inkmoth, no other plays, and says go. Looking at his hand, he's got some Force of Will action, a Vines of Vastwood, a Daze.
I just want to point out here that I think Tom Ross would have attacked with that Noble Hierarch. Brad is just like, I'm not even going to bother, but I think it actually happens sometimes.
What are you representing? I have seen with the modern Infect deck, when you're playing Might of Old Krosa, which is not as good as Invigorate, but I have seen people do the I'm taking Noble Hierarchs and bashing you with them plan. When your pump spells make your opponent gain life, I am less excited about doing that.
You can hardcast it, man.
Yeah, it has a mana cost. It's really not a good one. I haven't yet seen a Legacy game where the Infect deck has gone for real damage. That doesn't mean it can't happen, though.
At the Invitational, Tom Ross got me down to like 7. Before,
Okay.
I mean, at that point, I had to start killing all of his creatures.
But you did.
I did. It was still kind of close. Like, he definitely could have had a string of perfect cards to kill me, I think. But it was a thing where I was like, oh, I actually have to do something about these things, you know?
Absolutely. Turn 3 for Brad. Makes a fetch land. And really just playing it conservatively, activates Inkmoth, exalts it, hits Chihoy for 2. And right, this is what we've seen all day from Infect. These really conservative lines being taken. Don't cast your pump spells. Don't really play out too much stuff. Just hit them with an Infector until they do something about it.
Yeah. Just like, take 2. Okay, you have 2 Infect. All right, take 2 more.
You have 4.
Okay, attack you for 2. That's kind of like the danger zone, putting you...
Right, at 4, then I'm like, any pump spell just kills you.
Right
now.
So it's like, well, okay, well, maybe I need to do something now, and then you lose the fight, and you just lose the war at that point.
Yeah, what he's doing is, like, if you want to win this fight, you have to hold up all your mana and not do anything. And if you do that, I'll do nothing. Take 2.
Exactly.
And then you see again, Brad pumps it up to 4, doing just that. His hand, Daze, Force, Vines, plus something else. This is a lot. He has a lot of protection for this one Inkmoth.
Yeah, Spell Pierce.
That one's pretty good too. We see Chihoy, his draw for turn was Entreat the Angels. He could have made 1/4/4. He opted against it. Seems correct. Wonder what his plan is though. And he can't just keep, as we've mentioned before, he can't just keep taking 2 here.
Yeah, he's got to move at some point, but he did side in a lot of 1-mana cards. So you got to think on the turn where he actually decides to interact with Brad and go for something that he's going to have a decent amount of things to do.
Yeah, Brad draws another Vines, going to swing with Inkmoth. Interesting hand by Brad. If Chihoy had a way to kill this Inkmoth Nexus, Brad doesn't have any more creatures and never has.
Yeah, I mean, he might have been upset that he missed that 1 point of Noble Hierarch damage.
Because that would be the game plan.
Right. And again, it's like the high tide against Miracles once they have counterbalance top. It's like, that's not a good game plan. But, you know, if you win that game 1 in 1,000 times, it's probably worth it.
It's a great story. Like, man, he killed my ink moth. So Noble Hierarch, he just went to town
Yeah,
and
just gave him the beatdown.
and like 7 turns later, he was at 0. I don't know what happened. He just never killed it. Eventually, on the 5th turn, we had a counter war over my 0-1. It was great. Like,
Yeah, the second Noble Hierarch, and it's like, oh no.
yeah, finally he kills it, and then I played another.
Yeah. To play around, is it Staticaster?
Ooh, the story just keeps getting better.
Yeah. I mean, not really, because if they have a Staticaster, you're probably losing anyway.
Yeah, okay, so what, he Staticastered my Noble, and then I played the other one.
Yeah,
Got
showed
him.
him.
Brad is going to get aggressive here. He's going to go for the kill. You know, the Inkmoth exalted up to 6. He's going to Vines it. He has in hand Daze, second Vines, and Force of Will. Brad is ready to fight.
2 forces, Spell Pierce Daze. Only a single Daze, but
Okay, so 2 forces.
Daze, Spell Pierce, Vines.
So it's Force Vines because he has to pitch the other counter match.
Yep.
He has to pitch other blue cards, but okay, that's 3 cards. I am.
That seems pretty good, right?
You're not going to show up much better to a counter war. You know, 5 cards of your hand are contributing to the fight. Like, you only can have 7.
Dude, I don't know what these guys are doing to me, but I kind of want to play this deck in Modern now.
Oh gosh, and I know, you know, I get it. You just see this so much, like, oh, I want to Pendlehaven some 1/1s and hit people.
Yeah, and I don't know why, because it's like, it doesn't look great, but it just keeps winning.
Dude, blue, white, red's a deck in Modern. You got to watch out for that. These jerks are main decking 4 Paths, 4 Lightning Bolts, and 4 Snapcasters.
Not to mention Electrolyze.
And Electrolyze, like 4 in the main. Just saying before you sleep up in Modern,
I'll just fight
that's
through
not
it
a
all.
fun. That is not a fun matchup.
Okay, fair enough.
All right, we see Venser cast from Chihoi. He's going to try to come to this counter war, but that is not going to be enough to get it done. How does Brad want to respond? Venser presumably is bouncing either the spell or the Inkmoth. Brad dazes and Chihoi is done. We are a game apiece.
Perhaps I spoke too soon. I was like, oh, hey, you know, Chihoi is presumably boarding in all these cheap cards that interact, and it's just like, I have a Venser.
For land, Venser. Oh, you dazed it? Okay, we're done.
Man.
Next game. I'm just like,
I definitely
all right.
thought this was going to be
That
good.
deck was way less scary than it was the first game. It did seem like he maybe kept he was on 6 cards there, so maybe his hand had some weaknesses that he was hoping to draw out of and just didn't do.
Yeah, I mean, his first hand was actually pretty good, but it was lacking red mana.
Yeah. And had presumably a bunch of red spells.
I love that Brad just gets like all tensed up, right? And he's like, I've done it. I have assembled the combo. I have a lot of protection. Let's go for it. And it's so anticlimactic. It's like, but I still had all these Force of Wills. Like,
You're
why?
gonna be like, no, I wanted to fight. I wanted to show you.
Yeah.
I had you. I had your next spell and I had the one after that too.
Right, yeah, come on, Chihoi, just put up a fight, man.
I'm gonna win it anyway.
And then Brad's going to be so disappointed when he just gets crushed game 3 because he's like, man, game 2, I actually had a good draw.
I won that counter war by I won it by so much. I should have counted next game.
Exactly. Like, can we get a little trample damage going with the infect
I
in the
know.
next game?
You do feel that way, right? When like you win a really great game, you play well in game 2, and like when you play game 3 and like you mulligan and it's over, and you're just like, man, this was going so well.
Yeah,
what happened?
I beat you so badly last game.
I just outplayed you. It was great, and now I didn't. Now I lost.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I don't think Brad did much outplaying in that game. I don't
he played cards.
Right,
That was
I
good.
don't think Brad made any mistakes. Maybe he had a reason for not attacking with that Noble Hierarch, or maybe he just didn't want to waste our time. And that's kind of nice. I appreciate that.
Chihoi was at 20. He should have been at 19.
Yeah. But
you're absolutely right.
you know, like Chihoi didn't play bad. He just like mulliganed into kind of a bad hand. And
he just didn't play. He played some lands and watched Brad kill him. What is it? He got hit. Like Brad's turn hand is not particularly fast. Turn 1 Noble Hierarch, turn 2 Inkmoth, turn 3 to you, turn 4 to you, turn 5 6 you? Question mark. And she's like, yeah, 6 me. Okay,
Yeah,
we're done.
That's good.
Like, can you beat this 1/4 drop? A Vines will do it. You know, do you
Yeah.
have a Vines or a Daze or a Force of Will or a Red Blast?
Are you going for it with nothing?
Yeah, you're
because
going
I
for it
think that is the only way I can win.
Like, probably not. Brad actually hasn't played any cards this game.
Yeah.
You know, he has 6 or was it 7 in hand?
Brad had 5 left over.
Yeah, and players taking a short break here, and we come back to the booth here. Game apiece here. Brad Nelson and Chi-Hoi Yim. Blue, white, red miracles and blue, green. In fact, Chi-Hoi's going to get to be on the play again. We saw last time Brad jumped off to a start with Noble Hierarch. Like, does the way you approach the game, I don't know. It's like, does Brad's strategy have to change when you're behind here? It seems like
just being on the draw.
Yeah, I mean, we saw before the turn one Hierarchs on the play put a lot of pressure on Chi-Hoi, and I feel like on the draw that doesn't feel like pressuring anymore.
So on the draw, I feel like Chi-Hoi has more breathing room. When Brad's on the draw, Chi-Hoi has more breathing room. It might give him more time to actually try and set up something like counterbalance top. And at that point, it might be realistic for Brad to then become a little bit more defensive, board in more reactive cards, the things like Cross and Grip, which, maybe are worth bringing in, maybe they're not. Like there is the one Blood Moon looming, which can be a problem also. And counterbalance top definitely hurts his ability to sculpt his hand with things like Brainstorm. So, I mean, it's just a question of whether or not Brad thinks that, no, man, Inkmoth Nexus and Invigorate, those can kill through top counterbalance. That's no big deal.
Sure. We did see situations where, on the draw, Chi-Hoi can get a turn one top dazed. Means on the play, he can just, throw out a top, have it be fine, and then go play his reactive game. But his draws just get so much better. I don't know. It certainly, it does give him a lot more leeway.
Yeah, it changes things a lot, I think. But whether or not either of these players is going to react to that, it's hard to tell.
Yeah, that's just part of Magic. Your games are different on the play or play and draw. I don't know if their strategies noticeably change, but it seems like the tempo of the match changes.
Yeah, I mean, it might change the way the games play out, but I'm just not sure if the players want to change their setup based on that.
Yeah, so here we have players looking through their hands. Chi-Hoi is on the play this time. And we'll see if it's a keep here. I think we're debating on it. And both are going to keep underway. Chi-Hoi does have turn one Caracas top. It looks like his mana base may be a little shaky on this hand.
Yeah, maybe.
But he does have the turn one top on the play, and all right, most players here, when they pause like that, you think, okay, they're thinking about forcing it. I'm going to say with Brad Nelson, if I'm playing against him, I am not 100% that Brad even has Force of Will in his hand.
Yeah.
No way. Maybe he does. I'll believe it when he says Force of Will your card and shows it to me, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah, but in the meantime, you're just I don't know if this means yes or no, so I'm just going to sit here.
Yep.
And just see if you have a response.
All right. He does have it. Force of Will, pitching Flusterstorm.
Yeah, and maybe he chose to force that based on a little bit of weakness on Chi-Hoi's part.
This
just
is,
hemming and hawing, I don't know if I'm going to keep. All right, I'm going to lead with Caracas.
One of the things he's pretty good at is is reading that kind of body language. How bad did you need this top? Oh, really bad? Okay, I'll force it. Brad did not have a turn one play, but on turn two, he can play Glistener Elf here. Chi-Hoi's just made a pair of lands.
And that's kind of adorable, actually. Or does Brad have another one? I thought Brad might have drawn this on turn two, kind of disguising the fact that he didn't have a one drop and maybe was holding open Spell Pierce or something. So.
Yeah. So wait, does he? You mean?
I'm not sure. I thought I saw
another
second
Glistener Elf. So he could have just played more, but he's disguised. Yeah. This is very. Is it? Now here's the question, and I always ask this with Brad. Okay, is it incorrect to play the second Glistener Elf? Is that a bad strategy, or is he just, or is he gaining advantage through body language? It turns out when Chi-Hoi has Pyroclasm, yeah, great job. Don't play the second Glistener Elf.
Right.
But how many sweepers are actually in Chi-Hoi's deck,
Exactly that, and the copies of Terminus.
Yeah. And then there's the unbeatable Is It Staticaster.
Yes.
But we can't play around that guy if we're Brad.
Yeah, good luck.
And once again, we are waiting here. Does Brad have the Dazer Pierce? Yes, he does.
He does have the Spell Pierce.
All right. So right now he is playing straight up Magic. Every representation has been something he's actually had.
Yeah, but I think this could also be the long con, right? Where it's Brad does the thing where he flicks two cards in his hand to the front when he's thinking about forcing this top, and he actually has it, right? So at what point does Brad get to run that and then be like, okay, that resolves, and then Chihoi's just like, well, he did that every other time, like he must have it, and then Brad just has nothing.
There was no, here was the dilemma for Chihoi. There was no third land in his hand. When his top got countered, he had to crack the fetch land to cast Pyroclasm, but what originally was top plus fetch land, a great way to ensure your land drops, now is Caracas land, miss land drop, go.
Yeah,
Man.
and depending on what Chihoi's hand is, maybe that's not that bad. I mean, at least it means he has a lot of action, and if he can operate successfully off these 2 lands, then that would be great for him, I think.
Brad's going to start with a swing here. Tanking pretty long about this. I suppose the question is, does he want to... I'm wondering if he's thinking about firing off a value pump spell here. Right? It's a swing for 1, and yeah, invigorate. Okay.
Just,
Put more poison on him, right? He's in a weak spot.
do it while the getting's good.
Like, invigorate's always just a +4 to damage. It's not like I have to do it on the turn to kill you. And yeah, just fires an invigorate. Chihoi goes to 5 poison.
Yeah, and now that the Pyroclasm's out of here, so you gotta be a little wary of Chihoi just peeling a Terminus off the top.
Yeah, Chihoi does have the Terminus in his hand, so at that point you're worried about a couple things. You're worried about him peeling a Terminus. You're also worried about him peeling a Brainstorm.
Yeah, but by the time he is able to Brainstorm and then untap and play the Terminus, maybe you have an answer, or maybe Chihoi's just dead.
Yeah, he missed the land drop again. If you're Brad, you gotta be pretty happy about this. Do you have him dead? I want to say he has another Glistener Elf.
And I believe that's of Vines as well.
Well, that's a way bigger problem. I mean, if you're Brad, you can Vines here, or you can just put Chihoi to 7. I mean, Chihoi's on a 3-turn clock. That's not too much more.
Yeah, I mean, Chihoi has to react at some point.
Yeah, the worry about not trying to go for the kill here is, as you said, Terminus. And that's a pretty big worry.
Yeah.
Is it Staticaster actually right now is fine for Brad because, well, not fine, but Brad can get through it.
Brad has some redraws, right? Like he can use the Vines to counter it.
Yeah, I mean, if Chihoi, say, has a 3rd land next turn and is it Staticaster, Brad can just win with the Vines.
Yeah.
2 Glistener Elf swing.
I mean, Chihoi can play it and main phase activate it to play around exactly 1 pump spell.
Well, then Brad just lets it... Oh, yeah, to play on exactly 1 pump spell. Yep. And here's a swing. Is Chihoi going to go to 7? Does he have any reaction? Brad's hand's actually pretty light right now. Looks like he has a Vines, a Fetch Land, and some manner of blue card, but not too much. Doesn't need much, though. It's like Chihoi's at 7. Think about it this way. Chihoi's at 10, and Brad's hitting him with a pair of 2/2s, Yeah. If you translate it into real damage... That's not a situation I like being in at all.
Yeah, not really. I mean, you have a bunch of cards in your hand, but what you really need is to react to this board.
Yeah, and also you can never gain life against this deck. It's like the red deck wins always starts with a no life gain card in play. If you look, and we'll see Snapcaster Mage made by Chihoi there, just as an Ambush Viper. I like the play. He couldn't do it to block because then he dies to any pump spell.
Oh, but look at this.
The draw for the turn.
That's a Terminus.
That's a Terminus.
So Chihoi looks kind of silly running that Snapcaster out there and getting it Terminus, but not really, because if Chihoi hits a Terminus, he is happy.
Yeah, it's okay. He had cards to burn. It's fine. Brad does have another Glistener Elf, however. Can Chihoi kill it, though? If he does, he's going to leave Brad without an Infector. Things are getting tighter for Brad as well. He's got Chihoi to 7, but, eventually Chihoi's going to draw this land, and when he does, there's the whole, a mana screwed deck, when it finally draws out of it, can be a pretty scary thing.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they've been sitting on these big, expensive, powerful spells the entire game, and it's like, okay, now we're doing it.
Yeah, and Chihoi does finally hit the 3rd land. You see in his hand he has a Blood Moon. If he goes for it, he loses to Counterspell plus Pump, so there's some danger there.
Yeah, I mean, depending on what he has in his hand.
Yeah, of note, though, it's good against... Yeah, if he Blood Moons, the problem is, Brad has a fetch line, so Brad will find the basic force. So
right.
That's not good enough.
And then Chihoi has whichever basic he's fetching out, but it can't be an island because it's an Arid Mesa. So
wow, you're right. Yeah. Okay, that's... Blood Moon's not a thing right now.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
That's our late game plan. Probably by the time we play that, if we get to the point where we're playing Blood Moon, we've probably already won.
Or you're conceding. Basically, effectively, you know, it's just like, well, this is my last-ditch effort, and
Hurrah, Blood Moon. No, fetches his land and passes. It's kind of nice part of playing against Infect. You can just fetch your lands whenever you want.
Can you?
Can't. Well, you can. You can do damage to yourself whenever you want.
Oh,
like,
sure.
Yeah, you know.
You can pay life with reckless abandon,
right.
and it doesn't matter. But I was gonna say, you know,
fetch lands. Yeah.
Brad does have the one stifle.
Oh, he does have one. Okay, yeah, he does have one stifle. All right, Glistener Elf is gonna come in here. It's into a lot of open mana. Brad would have to have quite the read to cast the pump spell here. And Vendilion Click. Chihoi's tapping out for this. If Brad has a Daze plus pump spell, this is going to get there. I know he has the pump spell, but does he have anything he can do here?
I mean, if he thinks that the click is going to target him and it's going to take the vines, you might as well just use the vines now and force Chihoi to chump block with his click, and then he doesn't have access to click plus Karakas to repeatedly both mess with your hand and block a creature and return it to his hand.
So I'm assuming that the Vendilion Click triggers on the stack targeting Brad, and now in response he's been...
Yeah.
And Chihoi gets to look at Brad's hand. It is another Vines and a Noble Hierarch.
Yeah, so this is really interesting because he gets to use the first Vines, basically forcing Chihoi to jump block, and then this also forces Chihoi to take the other Vines. So now Chihoi's click is gone, presumably Brad's pump spell is going to be gone, but he gets to draw an additional card.
And Chihoi, he's debating as to which one of these he wants. It's a little, it's close for him. Look at his hand. He has a Blood Moon. That doesn't really do anything. Terminus, that's not going to do anything without Brainstorm. Those cards are a little slow right now. Wonder what interaction he actually has. There's a chance he just doesn't have more kill spells, in which case, you know, I guess Noble Hierarch is kind of a problem too.
Yeah. But it's like, even if you do have kill spells, you still want to take the Vines, I think, just because it counters your kill spell.
Yeah, maybe, I guess if you have counter spells, if you have like Spell Pierce style effects, maybe then you'd rather give him the Vines, because at least you can fight about that. But right, he goes ahead and chumps the Glistener Elf. It was a 5/5 this turn. Brad's going to search out his basic forest, and looks like he's just going to play the Noble Hierarch.
Yeah, very wisely fetching the basic, and awkwardly enough, drew the Daze off the Vendilion Click.
What an insult to injury there. It's like, oh, I got to draw you guys in the other order.
Yeah.
I still think the Daze will be worth a card here.
Yeah, almost certainly. Especially, it's one of those things where, like, Chihoi just saw his hand. You know, you're probably not going to play around it.
Yeah, fourth land from Chihoi Yim. Brad is swinging Exalted Trigger. We'll put it up to a 2/2. Is Chihoi going to go to 9? Yes. Okay, he's not dead, but now he has to kill every Infector for the remainder of the game.
That's a start.
It's Brainstorm. It's a turn late to Terminus it. Unless he can Brainstorm into something like Divining Top.
Or another Brainstorm.
Or another Brainstorm. Yeah, you have to Brainstorm into a draw spell.
Yeah, so that you can put the Terminus back on top and then use a draw spell on your opponent's turn.
You could even do something fancy like Brainstorm into like a land and a V-click, and that would work, but yeah, you need a way to draw on your opponent's turn. And as we know, it has to be Daze proof, whatever you're doing.
Right.
Well, we'll start with Brainstorm. He's going to cast it off the Volcanic Island. Brad in the tank. He has 2 cards now. We know one's a Daze. We do not know the other card.
It is a Croson Grip.
He draws Snapcaster Mage, Sensei's Divining Top, and Island. A pretty good Brainstorm. Terminus is going to go on the top of the deck.
Yeah, Brad actually has the perfect answer for this situation, though.
With Croson Grip.
Right. No, Brad, he played that land last turn.
He thought about it, yeah.
Yeah.
Top here. And you're absolutely right. He just has... Well, what Chihoi can still do is he can still flash Snapcaster Mage into play and then just chump the Glistener Elf.
Yeah.
And then untap and Terminus.
Yeah, that's certainly reasonable.
And he's pretty much forced into it, right? There's no responding here. Like, Croson Grip is happening.
Right.
And he thinks about it. He's like, yeah, nope. Nope, there's...
Like, maybe there's something I can do. No, okay.
If you had a counterbalance, you could flip a card.
Right.
That doesn't use the stack. Or you're not... That's triggered. It's like triggered abilities and morphs. That's like all the things you can do with Split Second going on. That's one of the weird things, actually. If you're playing Cons of Tarkir coming up, yeah, unmorphing does not use the stack, which seems real strange, but is actually true. Pendelhaven is the draw for Brad. He plays it here. He has the days in hand. What looks like it might be a lethal attack. Can he do it? Who do you like here in the match? You know, it looks like Chihoi's going to get to clear off the board.
I think so too. I mean, he has to expend a lot of cards to do it.
Hold on. If Brad dazes here, Chihoi has to crack a fetch land.
Okay, so yeah, if he thinks that
there's Terminus on top of the deck,
right.
Brad can... Okay, we've talked all day about how Brad's real good at reads. Just how good are you at these reads, Mr. Nelson? Like, did you just have it? Okay, he's got the Terminus on top.
I don't know. I think after Chihoi spends the majority of the early game and even part of the mid game when he has 4 lands not doing anything, what is he holding on to?
So when you think about this play, are you thinking of like, I think about it in your line, like probability that he has put a Terminus on top is actually pretty high. But like, there's another way to go at it, which is like, I'll just read the other guy, you know, did you put Terminus on top, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it's tough to actually just...
Why is it in the graveyard?
Where'd the Snapcaster go?
We'll figure that out. Oh, it blocked. It blocked.
Okay. So
Brad did not daze there. But if Brad dazes there, he gets it, right? Well, probably. Chihoi's on a really short clock.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he certainly has redraws. He can miracle another Terminus or draw something along those lines. But so given the way the game played out, where Chihoi basically just spent his turn doing nothing, like what do you think is on top, right? Like what would Chihoi want to brainstorm back?
And there you go. Terminus happens, sending all of Brad's creatures to the bottom of the deck. And Chihoi doesn't have a Divining Top anymore. He has Flusterstorm Blood Moon. And do you want a Blood Moon on this board? You can go ahead and get a Plains and you have Island Plains Blood Moon. And is that good enough? Like,
depends on the composition of his deck post board. Like how many CC spells does he have? Like how many chases, how many Entreat the Angels, things of that nature that he can't actually cast once he puts Blood Moon into play.
Yeah, Brad plays Wooded Foothills for the turn. And before drawing, Chihoi's actually going to go ahead and crack a fetch land. He did put back a second card on that turn where he put down Terminus, so presumably it's like another land, something he doesn't want. Maybe it was the Blood Moon, actually.
I think that's still in his hand. Yeah.
Okay, it's still there. All right, so the board is clear, but there's a lot of danger here. Chihoi is at 9 poison. And he doesn't have a top. He doesn't have a counterbalance. He doesn't have a chase.
He does have a Brainstorm.
It's a pretty good card to have right now. He doesn't have a fetch to go with it. Well, now he does. He has Force of Will and 2 more fetches. A fine start. You think he keeps the Blood Moon now because he with another fetch, like he can get a second blue, right? And then
yeah, but is second blue or second white more important?
Yeah, I mean second something colored mana. Like he's gonna crack this fetch land, right? Because the cards he's putting back are bad.
Yeah, and he wants to shuffle, and he still has access to Force of Will blue cards. So I think you could get Island and then play Blood Moon, but I think you might just want to wait until Brad has an Inkmoth Nexus. Like, you can try and shut him off a blue mana if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, there's a danger right now, like, Brad draws Blighted Agent, right?
Sure.
Okay, and that's a real danger. I suppose what Chihoi does have is if he doesn't play Blood Moon right now, he actually can hard cast Force of Will. He has enough mana, yeah, so leaving up 5 is big.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of walks into something like Daze, and Chihoi's Flusterstorm is not that valuable given how many lands both players have and how depleted their hands are. Like, the storm count is not going to be large, right? I feel like Flusterstorm is just reserved for pitching for Force of Will.
And Brad drawing a card and passing, it looks like. So we're going to go back to Chihoi's deck. He cracked to reshuffle once again. He needs one of his finishers. Can he find it before Brad gets one more point of damage in? And it is Wear Tear that is the draw for Chihoi.
Yeah, so it seems like Chihoi has Inkmoth Nexus on lock, right?
Yeah, he's got Wear Tear for it. He's got Blood Moon for it. Brad draws another fetch land. His hand really is wishing for a Brainstorm at this point. He's going to play Ink Moth. There we go. So if you're, how do you want to answer? Do you want to Wear Tear it? Do you want to Blood Moon it? You know, you have options if you're Chihoi. Wear Tear is
Not sure.
Wear Tear is like dangerous because cards like Vines interact with it.
Right.
You know, as Blood Moon just gets it.
I think you want to start the party with Blood Moon, and that's probably what you want to bait with.
Yeah, I suppose there's reasons to wait on Blood Moon. Like your Caracas, Blood Moon, while it doesn't hurt you too bad, it is not a nothing, right? Like you,
Yeah.
Caracas V-Click, like you lose Caracas Venser, Caracas V-Click. Those are real things. Those, like before, had he just drawn a Venser, that would be most of his late game right there.
Oh, yeah.
And here is Blood Moon from Chihoi Yim. Brad looks at it, and yeah, that's going to happen. Brad now with 5, make that 6 mountains and a forest. There are no basic islands in Brad's deck. There are no other ways to make mana outside of the Noble Hierarchs. If he wants to play any blue cards, he's going to have to find and cast Noble Hierarch.
Or another copy of Crossing Grip.
Or the second Crossing Grip, yep. He does have Force of Will in his hand, which fortunately he can still cast. He can pitch the days to it. But Brad he's finding more creatures, but because these Ink Moths aren't creatures, his job got a lot harder. And now Jataxian Probe paid. Brad's at 15. He looked at Chihoi's hand, and it's dangerous. Force of Will, Wear Tear, Tundra. And if you look at Chihoi's mana, he's never going to have enough to cast 2 Force of Wills because of this Blood Moon, but these Force of Wills, this isn't 1 counterspell, this is 2 counterspells.
Right. It's very unlikely that Brad gets to play 2 threats in the same turn.
And his draw for the turn was a blue card. I believe it doesn't really matter what it is at this point, unless it's Force of Will. And it's hard, right? So Brad doesn't have many threats even to draw, right? Because he's not going to be able to cast Blighted Agent. Ink Moths don't do anything. His only creatures in the deck are the Glistener Elves. And as long as Chihoi, say for Chihoi, and you tell yourself, I'm only going to cast Force of Will on Glistener Elf.
Yeah.
Like, Brad's going to have to just naturally top deck 3 Glistener Elves? Like, that's not a reasonable thing to do. I mean, it could happen, but you're certainly not a favorite.
Right. I know that some got Terminus to the bottom, and I don't remember if... I think Brad has shuffled since then because he ended up fetching up the basic forest, right?
Well, no, he actually just had the basic forest a long time ago. And that actually is something where I think it's possible that Brad, when the Blood Moon came down, wanted to crack his Wooded Foothills to get those guys off the bottom of the deck.
Right.
Granted, like, even if they're mixed into the deck as opposed to being stacked on the bottom, like, drawing and 3 Glistener Elves before your opponent draws Sensei's Divining Top or Force of Will or Jace or a Counterbalance doesn't sound very good.
No, it doesn't, but...
It's a line.
It is a line. It is a thing that I think slightly increases your chances of winning. And therefore, I think it's a line worth taking.
Yeah, and right now it's looking like Chihoi might strand Brad at 9 poison, but not the 10th. He's going to carefully dodge the phyresis process. We'll see if he can keep it up, though. And a little bit of a counter war here, being fought over Venser. And Brad forced, but Chihoi's going to force back.
I don't think I've ever seen such an aggressive fight over what effectively amounts to a 2-2.
It has flash. It's a 2-2 with flash.
Well, I understand.
It's Ashco Bear.
Yeah,
you know?
Sure.
And here comes the clock. It swings in. I mean, it is a 7-turn clock. And if Brad's plan is just to draw 3 Glistener Elves, 7-turn clock is terrifying. Like, how do you beat that?
Well, he doesn't need 3 anymore because Chihoi expended all of his Force Wills.
He pitched the Force to Force.
Right.
Yeah, now Brady's going to go ahead and Berserk the Venser. And if you haven't played before with this card, Berserk is real weird because it's old, and you'd think pump spells like this which make the creature die. Like, the guy goes Berserk, he gets trampled, doubles his power, and then dies at the end of the turn because, he went Berserk.
Yeah, it looked like Chihoi was like, hey, let me see that card, and Brad just like, what is written on the card is not what it actually does.
Yeah, if you want to see the card, you should ask this judge next to you. Don't ask me for the card.
Right.
But you can actually play it on your opponent's creature as a kill spell, which is completely in the color pie for green. To just destroy target attacking creature, you take some damage.
Yeah, so I like what ended up happening there, where Brad got to trade his Force of Will with Chihoi's 2 Force of Wills, and then when he had a Berserk all along and was able to use that to kill the Venser.
And here comes the late game here. You see Sensei's Divining Top drawn from Chihoi, and that is pretty huge. Now, granted, Chihoi cannot crack fetch lands anymore, so his top is not as dominant as it could be, but you see him getting counterbalance on top of the deck as well. He's going to go ahead, it looks like draw and just cast counterbalance while he has a chance. This is pretty safe because if the only card you care about is Glistener Elf, you already have counterbalance on 1 queued up.
Right. Yeah, so I like this play from Chihoi a lot. It's not like you gain a ton by holding open 2 blue mana every turn. And you're going to want to put this counterbalance into play at some point.
Yeah, eventually you have to tap out your blue. Why not now?
And it looked like Brad actually drew a Glistener Elf.
Well, it is unfortunate for Brad that happened now because Brad knows that counterbalance is on 1. He saw Chihoi put the card there, so he can't cast it. And he's going to pass back, and this is reaching the point where things are going to get real tough for Brad. There is a second Plains in Chihoyum's deck. Remember, when he wins, he's going to have to find the Plains and then entreat the Angels. Or maybe he'll just hit Brad with a Snapcaster Mage or something really silly like that. Brad is only at 8. These 2 power flash things will be more than enough to end the game. We see Pithing Needle is cast. It's going to name Inkmoth Nexus. That actually gives him leeway to bounce his own Blood Moon if he wants.
Yeah, if he wants to. It also gives him insurance in case Brad does find a second Croson Grip and is able to just like, all right, grip your Blood Moon, send in my 2 Inkmoths, what do you have?
Right. Chihoi finds another counterbalance. He doesn't have the win con yet, but it looks like looks like he has things wrapped up. We'll stick with it though to see. Taps the top, draws another card here. It's going to be Snapcaster Mage. There's the win con. Looks like the main phase Snapcaster is cast. And it's Brainstorm. Seems like a reasonable draw here. Gets his top back, can recast it this turn with some mana up if he wants to, and can float some cards on top of his deck.
Such as Terminus.
Such as Terminus, although at this point, the Swords to Plowshares is just as good. But he's going to go ahead and put the Terminus back on top. You never know when you might want it. This was all an end step. So now he's going to draw for turn. He draws a fetch. He's going to play second counterbalance, making sure Brad can't Croson Grip his way out of this one. Looks like he's... Oh, he revealed the course. Okay, so he didn't actually end up casting the second counterbalance. Looks like it was for a second, but no.
Okay, now he's
post-combat going to play. Said, hold on. Plays top center. He has top, balance, Blood Moon. Snapcaster Mage hits in for 2. Brad is down to 6. He has 3 turns remaining, but the lock is complete. Brad Nelson extends the hand, and Chihoi Yim is your Legacy Open champion here in Atlanta.